All right, good evening everyone, and welcome to Take Charge for January of 2015. So tonight we're very fortunate. We're going to be talking about the health of our bones. We all have them. It's very important that we keep them healthy. Our speaker today is Joanne James. She's a medical exercise specialist with MedFit Rehab, and Joanne's going to come down, talk to us about bone health, largely with a focus on exercise. What can we be doing from an activity point of view to keep our bones healthy? She's going to talk for about 30 minutes or so. At the end of her 30-minute session, our hope is that we're all going to head out onto the track, and she's got a few exercises that she's going to share with us. We're going to get everybody to try them out, and then you'll hopefully leave the session today not only with some knowledge, but also with some activities that you'll be able to do to maintain your bone health. Joanne, come on down.
Hello, everybody. I'm honored that you've come out on such a chilly night. It's so dark, it's so cold, but thank you so much for coming out. I'm really looking forward to sharing a lot of, just the right amount of information for you about bone health and exercise. So I'm a medical exercise specialist, and I spend my time working with medical professionals like doctors, physiotherapists, chiropractors, and I use exercise as a modality to actually help people get healthier and get fitter. Because if you look at the range of chronic illnesses, whether it's diabetes, osteoporosis, cardiovascular diseases, anything musculoskeletal, neurological, all of them, if you look at how they're treated, most times exercise is the most recommended activity to do in order to help to manage that, along with medication and a number of other modalities. Exercise is always one of the most recommended activities. So I spend my time working with people, showing them how to exercise in a safe and effective manner. And I use protocols that are medically researched, evidence-based, with the best practices attached to them so that they're safe and that people actually get the results that they're looking for out of exercise. Because we know we can all go to a gym and exercise, and we don't get the results that we're looking for. And or if you're not well and you're trying to exercise as part of feeling better and looking great, we know that if we don't exercise properly, then we don't get the benefits. When it comes to osteoporosis and bone health, exercise is an absolute essential activity that we need to do in order to strengthen our bones. Without exercise, you can take all the medication that you like, you will not maximize, or you will not benefit as much as you can or as well as you can without the exercise component as part of your lifestyle and managing osteoporosis. Can I safely assume that a lot of people here have osteoporosis? Because it wouldn't be unusual, because unfortunately as we change, our bodies change, and as we age, osteoporosis sort of becomes more prevalent, especially after the age of 65 years of age. Then osteoporosis becomes an issue. If you've had an eating disorder way back when you were growing up, if you were inactive for a long period of time, if you were in an accident and you were bedridden for a long period of time, all of those types of events actually would impact on your bones. So you may, actually may be genetic as well. You just never know sometimes how and why you get it. Let's just move a little bit forward about bone basics. And I should also mention we're going to be doing some jumping jacks, burpees, push-ups, all of that stuff in 30 minutes. And I joke. I could see everybody looking to clear the room out. No. In 30 minutes, what we're going to be doing is looking at some of the exercises that are important to incorporate into your daily exercise regime. Whether you horseback ride, which may not be so great for you, say you hike, or you do you power walk, or you lift weights, or you do Tai Chi, or maybe yoga, Pilates, some question marks around some of those activities. You always want to make sure that you are incorporating the appropriate types of movements and activities safely, but as well as effectively in your program. So just a little bit of bone anatomy. Most people think that just because you hit the bone and it's hard, that it's not a living tissue. It is a living tissue that keeps our body, gives us form, so it gives us a bit of a framework, and It's also made of protein, calcium, phosphorus, so it's not just plain calcium. So our bones are really simple, but kind of complicated. And the amount of bone that tissue is called with the mass, the amount of bone tissue is called bone mass, while your density refers to how compact your bones are. And this is where we sort of run into the problem, is that compactness, that density of your bone is what's going to determine whether you have osteoporosis, or another term that's been used, osteopenia. And the bottom line is, whether you use that term osteopenia or osteoporosis, it's all low bone mass. It doesn't really matter. It's like saying you're a little pregnant. Can't be. You are or you're not. So if you get a bone density reading and they say, oh, you're osteopenic, understand that you have osteoporosis. It doesn't really matter. And what we found is, and we're trying to use the language low bone mass more, is we found that when people thought that they were a little osteoporotic, they did very little about strengthening their bones, or eating correctly, or considering medication if that was the route they had to go. So we're trying to utilize that name, low bone mass, so that people understand the seriousness. In fact, when it comes to where you get the most fractures, it tends to be in the so-called osteopenic group, the group that thinks that they don't have to worry too much because they only have a little bit of osteoporosis, right? So that's why we're using the term low bone mass. So basically, osteoporosis is a skeletal disorder. Some people confuse that with osteoarthritis. I sometimes get people coming up to me and saying how their joints hurt and what can I do for you, and I can help you, but you need to know that it's probably more likely osteoarthritis versus osteoporosis, because osteoporosis affects the integrity of the bone, internally and outside. Okay? Just in case anybody's here for osteoarthritis. So in terms of osteoporosis, there's two primary ways in most cases that you may, get osteoporosis. The primary way through bone loss is, in most cases for women, menopause. We lose several hormones when we go into menopause, but most importantly, we lose estrogen, which help to maintain bones. So that tends to be for most women over the age of 50 when they start to encounter osteoporosis. Aging after the age of 65 to 70, it's more than likely you're going to lose a little bit of bone density anyhow. It's just part of our aging process. And then we have idiopathic osteoporosis, where they can't really trace what's happened or when or how you got osteoporosis. That's more of the primary. The secondary, which may impact on most people who have cardiovascular issues, such as some of you here, is the medications. Medications tends to have a major impact on bones. And sometimes it's unfortunate that it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. You know, you might have to take a medication that actually impacts on your bones, but if you don't, you might lose your life. So, conditions like certain diseases, medications like corticosteroids, medications for, say, osteoarthritis, medications for hypertension, a lot of these diabetes, a lot of these medications may have an impact on your bones. So even though you may be here for cardiac issues, you might have osteoporosis. Most people have a combination of chronic illness anyhow. They have a cardiovascular disease, and then they have osteoporosis. They might have hypertension, and they have osteoporosis. So sometimes you may have one thing, but there's not much you can do if you have a secondary. Wanted to kind of define fractures from fragility fractures from regular fractures. Fragility fractures, as is stated here, are fractures occurring spontaneously or following a minor trauma, such as a fall from a standing height or less. And that's a big difference from getting hit by a car, right? Or somebody running over you, or, you know, falling from really, you know, a flight of stairs up and flight. You know, it's more than likely you could fracture because that's a very high impact, high volume type of impact. Whereas a fragility fracture can happen. I've met people that have just grazed their hands, you know, across the corner of a desk or something and ended up fracturing. I've also met people that don't know how they ended up on the ground. They know that they didn't fall. They know that they didn't slip, but somehow they ended up on the ground and they ended up fracturing before they hit the ground. So you can fracture and then hit the ground, or you can hit the ground and fracture. See, there's a couple of ways you can do that. So, and I always find that really fascinating, because when the person goes to their doctor, the doctor says, you must have fallen. You had to have fallen. You maybe don't remember that you fell, and they're saying, no, no, no. I know I was conscious, but all of a sudden I was on the floor. So, unfortunately, so those are called fragility fractures. They happen following a minor trauma. Now, just for general statistics, it's a guarantee 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men will suffer an osteoporotic fracture at some point in their life. So that's a lot of people. The healthcare around osteoporosis is close to $2 billion a year, and that's not a lot of people that have osteoporosis on one level. I think it's over, like, in the Canadian population, something like 2.5 million people have osteoporosis, and yet the healthcare bill is close to like $1.8 billion. That's a lot of money contributed to osteoporosis. And if you notice here, it's more common than a heart attack, stroke, and breast cancer combined. That's a lot of people with osteoporosis, and our population is aging, so it's just going to become more and more common for people to have osteoporosis. And something can be done about it from the point of view of prevention as well as management. So my tip usually to people who have either children or grandchildren is, if you personally have osteoporosis, that they should be actually assessed, and they should have some sort of a bone density assessment earlier on versus later. Now, that's my personal opinion. I know the healthcare industry is trying to cut back on these types of, to me, preventative treatments and preventative ways of managing. But I always recommend that people do that. And if you have grandchildren and you know that you have osteoporosis and you've had it for a long time, you want to make sure that your grandchildren are exercising on a regular basis to build their bones, and that's what we're going to talk about shortly, but also that they're eating appropriately for their bones. And we know that, you know, teenagers don't care to do that. But I think what parents have to realize is that our bones reach their maximum peak density, more or less, between the ages of, I would say between the ages of 15 to 18 for young girls, and up to about 20 to 22 for boys. And that is where you have to make sure that the kids are exercising and eating as best as they can, because that is when their bones are going to be finalized. That's where they're going to get their final density. And if you miss the boat on that, then further down the road, there may be consequences to pay for that. So just in case you have grandchildren, I like to mention that. So I know that the key thing I wanted to talk about here was today is for exercise. How many people here and exercise on a, let's say, a daily basis? Excellent. So cardiovascular, meaning you're either walking, some of you may be jogging, you may be cycling, biking. Everybody's got some cardiovascular in their program. And in terms of strength training, is that being done? How many people strength train? Pretty much at least 3 times a week. Okay, so the numbers are getting smaller and smaller. How many of you practice some form of balance type activity on a daily basis? Okay, all right, so it's getting less and less. Some of those components are key components in terms of maintaining and keeping your bones strong. However, before you attempt any of the exercises on a regular basis, one of the things you have to do, and I always recommend with people, is all exercises are not created equal for all bodies and all bones. And I don't know if I'm kind of muddling that up. Meaning just because your friend can do this particular exercise doesn't mean that you can do that particular exercise. You might have a health condition, you might have joint issues that prevent you from doing certain activities. So I met a woman today. I was quite impressed. I believe she was around 81, 82. And she's limping away, and she's telling me how she tries to jog every day. And I don't normally like to tell people what to do unless you ask me, but I just had to tell her that you're limping, I don't think you should be trying to jog. But she wanted to keep her cardiovascular system up there, and I said, there's better ways to do that than to jog. There's nothing wrong with jogging, but it may be inappropriate, in particular for women after the age of 50, 55. It's really not an appropriate activity to do because it's very hard on the body, it's very hard on the joints. And most times when we get to 50, we normally have some sort of joint issue, right? We have bad knees, we've got ankles, we've got bad backs, we have neck issues, which can be aggravated with high intensity pounding type activities. So getting back to this, and that's why I told her you really need to kind of change that up, and I'll help her do that. But before you attempt any exercises, always check with your medical health professional first to say, I've heard that zip lining is great, should I do that? Or I'm interested in learning how to play golf, should I be doing that? Is that okay for my bones? Check with your medical professional first. Hopefully they can give you some good advice, and or talk to a health professional that can direct you in terms of how you should exercise. You should always be assessed first before you start any kind of fitness program, and then that way you can determine, am I doing the right activities? What areas of my fitness should I be trying to improve? What areas am I doing okay in? I just need to touch them up, okay? So don't kind of just go out there and jump into an exercise activity because it looks good. There could be a price to pay for that. You may benefit from it, but you could also injure yourself. So always keep that in the back of your mind, and just get some good, get a good consult to find out what you should or shouldn't be doing in your program. Choose a facility that has people that know what they're talking about. There's many clubs out there, there's many studios out there, there's many individuals out there. They've taken personal training courses, 2 days, 1 day. They take it over the internet, and sometimes they don't necessarily know what they're talking about or have the experience working with people with chronic illnesses of any kind to be able to actually be giving you direction and guidance. And I see this all the time. I get people coming all the time with injuries because of the inappropriate activities that were given to them to do, or the person that person didn't understand how many reps, how many sets, and whether they should actually be doing that particular activity. So it's just not worth getting injured over because of lack of knowledge, right? So I'm going to start with the precautions first, and then I'm going to start with what you should be doing. When it comes to precautions, when you have osteoporosis, your bones are basically, they've been compromised. I call them thin, and they can be easily fractured when a certain amount of force, which is abnormal or even normal, is applied to it. So one of the things that, if you've had a bone density report, if you've had a bone density done and you've been to your doctors, one of the things that they're going to give you an idea of is if you're at what risk you're at. Whether you're at low risk, medium risk, or high risk. Now, if you're in high risk, that's not so great, and you really want to be very, very careful with the types of exercise movements that you do. If you're low risk, you still have to be careful, but that's okay. At least, the risk of, fracturing is so much more less, right? So, in any case, in anything that you're doing, one of the things that you want to do when you're exercising, or not to do rather when you're exercising, is you want to avoid forward flexion. And forward flexion means you're standing and you bend forward, not from the hips, but from your back. There's 3 places that we tend to have osteoporosis. One is in our spine, our vertical spine. The next is in the hip bone. and the third is in the wrist. Those are the high fracture risk areas. So when you're going to do movements that compromise the spine, one of those movements will be forward flexion. Another one will be lateral flexion when you bend all the way over sideways. And again, if you have a healthy spine, that's okay. It's when you have a spine that's been compromised that you have to then be very careful with how much flexion that you do forward and how much flexion that you do sideways. Some people will say, well, how am I going to stretch my side if I can't bend over forward, or sorry, if I can't do a lateral flexion, or if I can't forward flexion? I would like to show you that when we go upstairs to the gym, because I'm sort of relegated to behind here right now. So normally I would have jumped out in the middle of the floor and said, okay, let's rock and roll, let's do this, but we're going to do that in a few minutes outside there. One of the big issues that you want to be careful of are twisting actions, where you torque and you go to the extreme end of your movements. Those are movements, again, that may be too much for the vertical spine and increase your risks for fracture. So you need to be very mindful of those movements. And that whether you're sitting or standing or lying down. So sometimes I'll show an exercise and say, okay, when you're standing, you can't do this. But if you were to lie down on the ground and do the same exercise, you still can't do it, right? So the idea is to kind of give you an idea of the principles of when you look at an exercise, that you can say, okay, that is asking me to bend my spine this way, which it's not a good idea to go that direction. So hopefully, I can't give you all of the exercises because it would take forever to do that. But if you learn the principles of forward flexion, lateral flexion, twisting to the extreme end, that kind of covers a lot of exercise movements, and it'll give you an idea of how you can judge an exercise. So avoid twisting, bouncing, and jerking movements. So I was speaking to a lady a few months ago, and I don't know why, but her doctor said that she no longer had osteoporosis anymore. So she proceeded to do horseback riding, and she didn't get very far. They had to literally pick her up and take her off of the horse. Because of that bouncing, jerking motion like this, she ended up fracturing several of her vertebrae. So, and I'm sure that they weren't bounding, but that kind of jerking motion with a spine that is, been compromised is not very good. And the other one was another woman who decided her and her family were going out on the speedboat. So the ones that kind of cruise across the top of the water. And then another big boat, bigger than that, went across. And so they had to contend with the waves of that boat. And it went up, up, up like that. And she ended up fracturing. So they ended up taking her off of the boat. So it's really fascinating. I mean, it doesn't look like it could be a problem, but that kind of bouncing and jerking kinds of motions that you have to be careful of as well in order to preserve your spine. So what it means is you have to really focus on good lifting techniques. I know a lot of you may have grandchildren that you want to bend down and pick them up and give them a big hug, but you need to be very conscious of how you do that. And we'll talk about how to maybe get down to the ground in a way that allows you to pick up that child or pick up a box or do any other activities of daily living that require that you bend forward, that you kneel down. We'll look at some of those, and you can certainly ask questions, and I'm certainly happy to answer them for you. So keeping in mind forward flexion, especially from the upper part of the spine, as opposed to from the hip, lateral bends over where you really twist over sideways, and then turning to the extreme end. So yoga tends to have a lot of these types of movements, which, how many people do yoga in here? Yeah, good, okay. Wonderful, wonderful activity to do along with Pilates, along with any exercise type activities. It's just that you have to be very mindful of the type of movements you're doing within that. So I spend time with people modifying the yoga or the Pilates movement so that they can still participate in that activity, but participate safely, right? That's the big key. You can still participate, but you know how to participate safely so that you don't actually compromise your spine, okay? I used to say before, no yoga, no Pilates. And then I'd have to run for the hills because, you know, people were throwing daggers at me because they absolutely love that activity. So then I realized, okay, now I'm going to show them how to do it safely. But it puts all that responsibility in your hands, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Okay, so what is most important that you have in your activities on a daily basis? Weight bearing. Weight bearing activities. Sitting down is not weight bearing. So if you're a cyclist and you love cycling, is that weight bearing? No. I know there's people in here that absolutely love swimming. It's a wonderful activity to do. I don't do it. Hard on the hair. I don't do it. But is that weight bearing? Okay, so swimming is not the #1 activity if you want to strengthen or build your bones. Because you are buoyant in the water, there's very little benefit for your pelvic bone and your hips. Now with your arms, if you use paddles and stuff like that, maybe. That's a lot of work to try to do that. So swimming is a wonderful activity, not the most recommended activity if you want to build your bones. So I would say do some weight-bearing activities like walking, power walking. You can even do ellipticals and stuff like that to build your bones, and then go for a swim for fun. At least put it in the right perspective. You're not building bones when you swim, but you're enjoying yourself and you're having better health, better joint movements and all of that, right? So I just say that because weight bearing is #1. If you're not weight bearing, I'm not sure what you're doing, right? So walking, gardening are good examples. The only problem with gardening is you have to just basically be careful of how you're positioning your spine when you bend over to pull out those weeds, right? And we'll look at that in a few seconds. So weight bearing is #1, must be done. Resistance training, and I noticed the hands dropped on the resistance training. At least half of the hands went down. It is absolutely essential to bones that it be challenged, either by impact or by resistance. And that resistance is when you lift weights, whether it's dumbbells, whether you are using machines, whether you use your own body as a form of generating resistance, using exercise bands, anything that forces the muscle to contract momentarily is an activity that you need to get into your program at least 3 times a week. So and I know a lot of people will walk and they'll do the weight-bearing activity, but they'll do nothing around strength training. And the less that you do, the less bone density really in general that you're going to have. So you need to have some form of strength training in your program in some way, shape, or form. The other activity that's important are postural and balance training. When we were younger and we were growing up in our 20s and 30s, cardiovascular activity was key, very important to get that heart in shape because it was going to take us into our golden years, per se. As we got into the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, strength training becomes very important. Why? Because we're starting to lose bone, naturally because of aging. And #2, we start to lose muscle mass, again because of aging. And if we're not doing strength training to strengthen our muscles, then we know pretty much that we're losing muscle and bone at the same time. So when we get into our 60s plus, our posture as well as our balance now becomes an issue. Okay, so what you notice with a lot of people is you start seeing a lot of rounded shoulders. They've spent a lot of times at computers, their heads are down, they're not strengthening their posture muscles of their back, so the muscles get weak, and these muscles get tight, so they pull your shoulder forward, and we tend to sit slumped in our chairs most of the time. So our postural muscles get weak, our core muscles get weak, and then on top of that, we start to lose our sense of balance over time. Because if you don't use it, you lose it. That's really the bottom line when you don't exercise. If you don't exercise to strengthen muscles and stay flexible and improve muscle endurance, all of these different components of fitness, you're basically losing it. And as we get older, it speeds up in that process. So you must incorporate postural and balance training basically into your program if you want to keep good, strong postural muscles, avoid that slumping, which throws your equilibrium and your balance off as you're walking. We want to keep those two quite strong. So here's some recommendations in terms of activities that we need to be doing. Always incorporating some weight-bearing activities at least 3 to 5 times a week. If you are walking, that's great, and I suggest walking every day. Walking is a wonderful activity. It's not the be-all and end-all to keeping your bones strong. In fact, you have to modify your walking program in order for it to benefit your bone. So the bottom line is you can't do the same thing day in and day out and expect a different result. If you want to improve your bones, your program must change. You cannot do the same program, lift the same weight, walk the same distance every day at the same speed, and then hope that your bones are improving and getting stronger. You must change various dynamic parts of that routine of what you're doing in order to stimulate the bone. So 3 to 5 times a week, strength training at least 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what your time is like. Balance training, I know that the studies show that we should be doing balance type work every single day. And then with postural training, that should always be a part of your workout, definitely. And if anybody wants this, you can certainly, I'll just give you a little handout. You can certainly email me and I can send you this if you'd like, so that you have something to work with. Great. So, in terms of, I think we've probably done about 30 minutes. What I would like to do now, and I hope everybody would like to come along, is I'd like to go up now to the gym area, and I'd like to go through some of these exercises in terms of demonstrating exercises that are incorrect and how you can do it correctly, and things that you can do at home. Is everybody open to that? I'd be happy to do that. Yeah. And then I'll be certainly available after to talk to people if they have anything specific that they would like to talk about. Yeah, and if you'd like, I'll ask questions. I can answer questions up there as well, or should we do some here?
Shall we do the questions here, Alex? Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll do the questions
okay. This gentleman had his hands up first.
Can osteoporosis be reversed?
Well, I get that question a lot. And the question was, can osteoporosis be reversed? Now, I've had several of my clients, they came initially because they wanted to learn how to exercise safely, just in general, so that they improve their musculature, their endurance, bones, etc. Some have come back saying that they went back to their doctor after a year and a half, and their bone density was not showing any osteoporosis at all. And they're telling me that. So it seems to be that it's a possibility, but I think it depends on the degree of osteoporosis that you have. If you have a bone density reading of minus 3.5, I'm not sure you're going to be able to reverse something like that. If you had a bone density read, of minus 1.7, maybe you might be able to reduce that to minus 1.5, which kind of puts you on the other side of basically having so-called osteoporosis. So I've had people come back saying that their bone density report came back great. Not everybody comes back that way, though. And this lady had a question? Fantastic. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there an age where you think men should stop running? You mentioned women post-menopause. Does any of that apply to men?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think where men and women should stop running is when they have joint problems, knee problems, back problems, hip problems. But when you're telling somebody who's addicted to running that, it's like, again, go running for the hills, right? Or it's like telling a golfer, this is not so good for your spine. But mostly for the women, because they have more fragile bones because of the loss of estrogen. But I've never heard them say men have to stop. If you have some particular health issues, it's recommended. Yes. Yes, sir?
If somebody is taking biophosphate, the actin, does that have any impact on
Well, the recommendation, and the gentleman was asking if biophosphonates like Actinol have any impact on exercise. It may or it may not. It doesn't really matter. If your doctor's recommending that you have, that they're recommending that you take a form of medication, then you'll have to roll with the doctor on that, because they have an idea of your health issues and your overall lifestyle. Exercise is a little bit separate from that. Whether you're on medication or not, the studies show that it's much better. You can improve your bones, but I don't know if there's a direct correlation between the two. Yes.
And if a person has sort of medium set bones or large set bones, a lot of people think, well, then you're safe.
Right.
Are we?
The gentleman's question was, if I have medium-sized bones, or you called it heavy set bones, am I safe? And I say no, you're not safe. I think medium-sized bones and heavy-set bones is relative, and most people are describing themselves as that. I don't know if there's such a big difference, but if you're not eating correctly, if you've had some sort of an event in your life that meant that you were not exercising for any long period of time and you were bedridden, it doesn't really matter what kind of bones that you've had. There's a woman that I met who was a power lifter, had been a power lifter and athletic, and she was like this, and she looked like she had some heavy set bones. And then she went for a bone density assessment and ended up coming back with osteoporosis. And she was totally flabbergasted because her specialty was osteoporosis. So really, your bone density is going to be depending on the kind of activities that you did or didn't do, as well as the foods you eat and the kind of lifestyle that you had. So for instance, I've met people that unfortunately were in concentration camps, and because what happened in concentration camps, and they were young teenagers, young children growing up, they did not have the appropriate nutrition for their bones. So 30, 40, 50 years later, they have osteoporosis. So that's not a surprise. It's not something that they did for purpose. It just so happens that at that very crucial time of development, they didn't get the proper nutrition. Anyhow, that's an aside. Mr.
What foods strengthen your bones?
Pardon me?
What foods strengthen your bones?
Foods that have like calcium in it, sardines, various types of fishes. And if you'd like, I can send you some information on that as well. Anybody, just if you give me your email address, I'll just fire it off to you. There's a wide variety of foods, fruits and vegetables that are highly recommended, but you can't just eat one food. You have to have a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, because most of them, kale, spinach, they carry calcium in it as well. But foods work synergistically with each other as well. So it's like trying to take one vitamin. Vitamin D has been very popular. It's been pushed. Calcium has been pushed. Now they're saying that without folic acid, without vitamin K, the omegas, that your bones will be compromised. So really, truly, you have to just eat well and eat a wide variety of foods. And if you need supplements, you take supplements as well, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Yeah. Somebody else had a question? Great. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you for that part, Joanne.
No problem. Thank you.
A really high position for your back. If you need to, you want to bend forward like this to pick something up from here. Stick your bum out and try to bend from there versus like this, okay? Most fractures that occur for somebody who has osteoporosis is up in the thoracic part of the spine right here. And that happens because we slump so much when we're sitting, like this. That's how we sit, right? And so eventually over here, it's like this. You keep doing something like this a lot, and eventually it does what? It breaks, right? It snaps. So up here tends to be a high fracture area, and that's because people are bending over like this, or they're sitting in their chair and they're slumped, watching TV and doing whatever they're doing. So we need to learn how to sit up, and I'm going to just show you quickly the perch position, which helps to strengthen your back muscles. You sit a little bit away from the back of the chair. You're going to sit closer to the edge of your chair, and you're basically going to sit upwards. When you want to get out of the chair, you lean forward with your back flat and press yourself up. So for some people, I notice when they have to use their hands, in actual fact, they don't because they're in a perch position. So that's almost like a preparation. So we're going to sit back down again. And you sit alert. So this is a more alert position to be sitting in. Technically, it's the best position we can be sitting in because it takes a lot of pressure off of the upper part of the spine where we do that. So anything forward flexion is very hard on the spine, so don't do it. You don't do forward flexion like that. You got to bend from the hip, right from the hip, and you keep your back flat. Anything where you have to twist and turn, don't do it, to the extreme. So a big movement is when people like to do this and then all the way across. That is, again, another exercise that compromises the spine. That's the term I'll use. So if you need to do a nice little turn, all I suggest that you do is just kind of turn like a bit of like a quarter. But you never, ever, ever, if you have osteoporosis, go to the extreme. In yoga, there's a lot of movements where they do that. So you have what's called, you remember the pretzel? The pretzel in the yoga? So that's the one where I'll demonstrate here. One leg is out, and one leg is like this, and you turn as far as you can go. So that's a very common exercise, but it's again too much if somebody has osteoporosis. So generally they might be in this position, but the turn would be like this. It's minimal. It's not over. You come back and you just turn slightly. Okay, and that just helps to protect the spine as well. Okay, if another exercise, and maybe none of you might be doing this, is the child's pose, where you're over like this. How does my spine look? It's curved, right? So, not such a great idea. But if I'm going to modify it, I want to keep my back flat, so I'm going to turn sideways. I keep my hips up in the air so that I can keep my back flat. Everything is to try to keep my back in a neutral position, just avoiding that flexion of the spine like that. So twisting to the end point, try to avoid, just modify that twist. And if you're doing something like the child's pose, extend the arms out. Now, do you all remember this exercise many years ago? Did you all do this one? Yeah, so anything about what do you think about that particular movement? What's the problem with that one? Yeah, it's that whole twisting motion, and now there's an additional element to that, which is it's now unsupported. So when you bend over like this and your hands free, a lot of the weight is now being held through here, the lower part of your back, right? Which again is very hard on the lower back, but it can also be because most people have that flexibility, they don't actually flatten their back when they do it. So forward flexion, unsupported, and twisting actually is quite hard on the back as well. So forward flexion, then there's lateral flexion where you stand up and then you see people going over like that. You see the spine is curving. So you don't even have to do that, and quite frankly, all you have to do is basically reach up. So I'm going to have everybody stand so that you can notice the stretch. Oops, oops, oops. Oops. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Been through this before. So I'd like everybody to extend their right hand straight up in the air. And I'd like you to actually reach your fingertips to the ceiling as far as you can go, up, up, up. So you should feel it through. You're going to actually feel it through the waist here and also through the shoulder as you extend up as far as you can. So that's all you need to do when you want to stretch this side. So let's do the other side because we always want to be balanced, right? You're going to extend as far as you can, reach, 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 as far as you can. Some of you may have to soak in the tub tonight with Epsom salt. And then extend the arm down. Excellent. Okay. So we have a little stretch that we do for the back here. And what I recommend, I suggest that most people, what I'd like you to do is to just keep your back straight, but extend the arms out so that you're stretching the back of the shoulder. And then the muscle that tends to be tight, that creates a lot of problems, is our chest muscles. We call them our pectoral muscles. So you're going to place your hands behind your back, and you're going to gently squeeze the shoulder blades together. And this should be done every day. Every day you should be stretching this muscle group so that it takes the pressure off of your shoulder, the back of your shoulder. And then relax. Good. So now, everybody's comfortable with marching on the spot? Oh, all right, good. So we're going to march. So we're going to just march. Excellent. Now what you're feeling is the impact of your feet hitting the ground, which is what your bones like. Now if you do this every day, all the time, you're going to have to change that routine. So I'm going to show you, and you can try this. And stop. Good. So we have a little bit of a warm-up, okay? So now what I'd like you to do is you're going to stand with your legs apart slightly. I'm going to do a very basic one. You're going to bend your knees, and you're going to engage your midsection, your belly. So pull the belly button in. That is an exercise for your abdominals. I don't know if you know that. That's how you work your transverse abdominis, by pulling in the abs. That's literally an exercise for your abs. Now what I'd like you to do is one heel, then the other, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and you should feel a little bit of that vibration. The hips should not be swinging because we're not in that. I see some people swinging the hips, and it's the men, not the women, the men, right? Now we're going to pick that speed up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I should be able to hear you though. Well, some people are dancing, yes. How's the legs feeling? Ah, a little bit of balance, right? Yeah, it's not so nice anymore. Now we're going to do this a little faster if you're comfortable. Only do this if you're a little comfortable. So it's like a rat-tat-tat-tat, right? You should feel that in the legs. And stop. And then you're just going to lightly kick the legs out. So for somebody who cannot jump up and down, hitting the ground as you're doing it, jumping up and down, that's another way of creating a little bit of impact without jumping, right? So you hit down, down, down versus this, right? Because not everybody can jump, but everybody can do this as long as it feels okay on the knees and it feels okay on the hips. So that's something that you can do every day for about 30 seconds. Maybe 5 sets of 30 seconds is a great way to do that. Now, does anybody have any questions about an exercise? One of the exercises that they do here that's great for the abdominals is, and I'm going to have everybody try that, is I'm going to have you go back to your chair and remember the perch sit. Everybody's going to perch sit on their chair, which means nobody's back is touching the chair, right? Now you're going to sit as tall as you can. You're going to exercise your abdominals by, pulling it in. You're going to cross your arms across your chest, so you're still sitting up nice and tall. And then very gently you're going to lean back with those abdominals still pulled in. You're not touching the back of those chairs. And we're going to hold, and then everybody, we're going to count to 30. Yes? Thanks for asking, Rob, but no. Okay, ready? 1, 2. We're still leaning back. Keep breathing. Okay. Now hold. How does that feel? Can you feel the abdominals working? Technically from the pubic bone right up to the ribs, now upright. Good. That's a great way to work your abdominals without going on the ground and doing these. In fact, you cannot go on the ground and do these. Why? You're twisting and you're doing forward flexion, right? Those aren't exercises that are, first of all, the studies show that they're not as effective anyhow.
How do you count and breathe?
How do you, well,
Count and breathe at the same time.
that's why I have you counting, actually. When you count, you have to breathe. So if you're counting, you're breathing. Like,
Okay.
yeah, that's how I get people to actually breathe when they're doing certain exercises. So that's a simple, very good way to actually strengthen your abdominal muscles by doing a little bit of a lean back and count to about 30 or whatever works for you. And then the goal is, if you could, to go a little bit longer over time. Because remember, if you do the same thing day in and day out, the same weights, same distance, you can't expect a different result or a change if you're always doing the same thing. Because I've met people that said, oh, I've been lifting 2 pounds for the last 20 years. I'm going, wow, what a waste of time. You know, because really, your muscles could have been so much further ahead if you had just incrementally increased it, maybe by, if you can, a half a pound or to a pound. There is a limit. You can't keep increasing forever, but the question is, you know, how much more do you want to do? The point is, you just want to lift enough that you know that you're making some positive changes for your muscles and for your bones. So the strength training, the key thing is, if you're lifting light weights all the time, it doesn't do much for the bones. The way the bones respond is if the resistance is increasing and you get to a point where it's a challenge. Like if you lift, 12 and on the last 3 or 4, this is some serious work. That's where you need to be. If you lift 12 of these and you're kind of doing your nails and then, then you can put your makeup on, you're wasting your time, quite frankly. So you always want to feel that little bit of work. Now, if you're doing bicep curls but you have bad elbows, then you can't be lifting heavy-duty weights, right? And that's why you have to see someone first, get clearance from your doctor, see somebody who's like, who knows how to deal with people that deal with injuries and know how to work with them. But just understand that you have to increase the degree of difficulty or the resistance, the weight, the distance, any of those factors you have to change in order to make that exercise more effective. And then you have to do it safely, right? Anybody do Pilates or any other activities that you have a question about? Yes?
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to put in is golf. And there's probably a few golfers here, right? So, and I don't mean to be mean, but I'm not a golfer. So if you see me doing a baseball thing, right, that's my idea of what golf is, in a sense. What's wrong with this motion? What's wrong with this movement? Right. So if you notice when you're doing this, bang. What else do they? You're twisting, but what else is part of this stroke? Sorry? Yeah, the hitting and the intensity of the swing. Because what's the goal? Get that thing as far down that, what is it called again? The green as they can. So that poses a problem for your spine. I mean, that's, so for golfers, there seems to be a way that a golfer could learn how to swing the ball safely, or swing the club, I can tell you, safely so that they don't injure themselves. One of my colleagues, she's had 14 fractures. She's not giving up golf for anything. She's going to die with a golf club in her hands, right? But she has found a way to be able to swing in a way that her spine stays neutral, in a neutral position, which is very fascinating. So it's doable, it's possible, but it's not for everybody, right? So just again, understanding that principle of the swing and how to do that correctly is very important if you want to play golf. So as I said before, all activities are good activities. It just depends on what your health issue is, whether you should be doing that activity enough. And I always try to reiterate that, because sometimes people come back to me and say, I said this thing was terrible, and I love this thing, and I think you're wrong. And I'm going, I don't have a problem with the activity. It's just if you have osteoporosis, it may be a problem. And that's all you need to know. Then after that, you're all adults, and you all make up your own mind and make your own decision and do whatever you want. That's how I look at it. Sir?
In Pilates, yoga, and other classes, they have you do planks and other things
Yes.
where your wrists are being stressed. Is there a safe way of doing that?
You might have to modify and go on to your fist. Now, if you're doing a plank on your hand, yes, that might be an issue. It depends. If you do a plank like this, okay, some of you have problems with your wrist, right? So that can be quite painful, right? And you may not want to do that. Your option would then be to come down on your forearm, and that should be fine. It makes it a little harder, but that's okay. Or some people have their hands on the side of the chair as an option. So sometimes you just have to find out which position is going to work best for you. And worst best case scenario, or they do it from their wrist or from their fist. And what happens to my wrist in this position? It's straight as an arrow. So usually people don't have a problem with that. The question is, if their hands are big enough, if they can position on their knuckles correctly. Again, you would need to be shown how to do that to make sure that it's appropriate for you. But not all exercises, again, is designed for all bodies. So always try to find out what's the best movement for you and then go from there. Sir?
Would you recommend squats? I used to do squats.
Absolutely. So what you did earlier were squats. When you were getting in and out of the chair, that was a form of a squat. That's probably the best way to really strengthen your quads, unless you get on one of these machines and use the machine to strengthen the quads. But the squat is number one. I think people should do that every day to keep those legs strong. Yeah. Yes?
What about the use of elastic bands?
Yes. Resistance bands? Excellent. They're great. The only problem sometimes people have is how it's wrapped around their hands. So we have bands here, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. The problem is how the bands are held. So sometimes you can get tubes and stuff like that, but with the band, if you tie it, like if it's around the palm of your hand, not your fingers, because then sometimes the band squeezes. Oh, Rob, we found one. Thanks. So what you'll find is people wrap it around their hands like that, and then their wrist is like that when they're doing the exercise, so then they have problems with their wrist. You have to wrap the band around the palm of your hand, and then you won't notice anything. So it should be around, and you should be able to do that if you wanted to do that. You want to keep the wrists straight, not like this, because you're straining the ligaments and tendons around the wrist area. So you want to keep the wrist straight when you're doing the exercise. And then that way, it's the muscles in the arms or the shoulders or whatever you're exercising that's doing the work and carrying the load, right? So the technique and how you hold your weights and how you hold the band, but these are great tools, very great tools. It's nice because you don't have to carry dumbbells with you. You can carry a resistance band, and you can get a full workout from the legs to your chest to your back. So a little postural exercise. I'm going to have everybody stand. And so I want you to, to start to strengthen the back of the shoulders, and in the middle of your back is called the rhomboid. So from here, your hands are going to come down with your palms facing back, and I'd like you to very gently, if you can, and as long as it doesn't bother your shoulders, you're going to squeeze your shoulder blades together. Now you can do this with weights and dumbbells. It gets a little harder. And you're going to bring your arms back and you're going to pulse. Still keeping the palms back. You're squeezing the shoulder blades. Same time. Try not to do this because that's not what's being done. You're just pressing back, and I'd like you to do that. And we're going to just do that for 10 minutes. I don't think we're going to do that for 10 minutes, but great. Now I'm going to ask you to hold it right here, and now I want you to pulse your shoulder blades together. Squeeze, squeeze, so you're isolating and really using that, and you should be able to start feeling work between your shoulder blades and the back of the arms. And this is a great way, if you use weights, it's a great way to strengthen those two muscles in your upper back, between the shoulder blades, your rhomboids, and your rear deltoids, the back of your shoulder. And now we're going to release. And you can feel a little bit of a difference when you put it down. And then we just want a very light, gentle stretch. Your hands come out in front, but try not to round your back. Keep your back nice and flat. You just extend through the arms. Just extend through the arms. And that's great. That's a nice little light stretch for your back. And then a gentle release. And then shake it out. So these are some exercises that you can do at home on a daily basis to, either stay a little bit more flexible, to stay strong. But the movements that I wanted you to just go away with is just be mindful of the flexions that you're doing. And the last thing I was going to show you how to get down and maybe pick up a child, but keep your spine straight, right? So if this is a child and I want to pick up that child, what I would try to do is either come down on one knee and I would pull that child close to me, right? So that their weight is close to my center, my weight, and then I would try to power myself up via my legs. And that is why you need strong quad muscles, right? Because if you don't have strong quads, I'm not sure how you're going to lift that child up. You've got to have that. So or you bend down with both knees. Again, what position am I in? I'm in the squat position, right? We did that sitting and standing, and you can bring that child close to you and power up through your legs. That's another way that you can do that as well. So it's very key to make sure that your legs stay as strong as you can every day, because you never know what you're going to be lifting. Could be a wheelbarrow full of money. I don't know. Something. I'll figure it out. Even if I'm weak, I'd figure that out, right? But you want to keep those muscles strong as much as you can so that you can do your activities of daily living with a lot more ease and enjoy your lives a lot better. So is there any more questions? Because if there isn't, I can certainly answer after.
How did you say we could get this information?
Actually, yeah, and Chris is with me, so is that okay to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Chris can hand that out, and there's an email address on there. You can just email and just say you were here and that you'd like some information, and I can send it off to you.
Joanne, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You were great. Thank you.